The result is that these projects have got impacts that then we are left to deal with after the construction. And this is not good. So what I would say, therefore, to answer your question is there is their need to have different sectors and different professional, communities work together to ensure that these projects are sustainable, these projects are inclusive, and these projects are resilient. You've just given an example of the Dongo Kundu area. That is a good example of lack of resilience. The fact that it couldn't withstand that mere landslide is a very clear indication. If somebody could have done their due diligence and ensured that all the necessary procedures were followed, it might have survived. But now there's a risk that even the rest of the sections might fall off. I think when we visited that area yesterday, we were able to see cracks already emerging in other sections. That is not what we want. It's not good value for money. So we need to really engage in a thorough process at the very beginning. That is what I would call multidisciplinary.
Sure.
Bring in experts from different areas to try and inform what product we are going to have at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Daktari. Having said that, what are some of the impact to the community, to the local people around, to this climate change?
The impacts of climate change, particularly on local communities, is not a very direct thing to identify per se, but I think the way things are happening around them, for instance, the fall in yields for agricultural communities, the emergence of some of the crop pests that were never there. I think recently you must have heard about the locust invasion up in Turkana. Those are clear manifestations of climate change. The weather is now favorable for the locusts to thrive. You've seen failure in yields in some of the areas where crops don't get adequate rain to see them through to the end of it, or prolonged drought that results in famine. So the pastoral communities are losing livestock, or some of those pastoral areas are being flooded. And so people who used to suffer from lack of water are now having to deal with the excess floods that is causing more trouble.
Some people think that it is a blessing to have a lot of rains, and places like Garissa, where you never used to have a lot of rains, so they think that is a blessing. Is it a blessing or an effect of climate change?
Well, of course it's a blessing for people who don't have water to have water, but the trouble is it disrupts the normal operations of the ecosystem. So if it's a dry ecosystem that has got plants and mammal species that are used to that dry environment, when the rain comes in excess and so the weather conditions or the weather patterns change, then there emerges what we call invasive species. So the ones that never used to be there that now are thriving because of that new climatic condition, what we call a microclimate that has been created, is now helping them to thrive. And the net effect might be that they are killing off or eating away some of the native species. So what that means is if some of these species were important for their dietary needs, or they were important for regulation of climatic conditions or flooding or weather patterns in that location, then they become vulnerable. They become exposed to the impacts of flooding now. On the flip side, sometimes when there are those kind of rise in water levels, it comes with benefits. So for instance, when the fish species thrive in places like Lake Baringo, down Lake Naivasha, then perhaps the fishing communities might say, well, we are benefiting, but at what cost? It becomes more expensive to engage in business under those circumstances because of the unpredictability. You do not know for how long that fish availability is going to be sustained, but also there might be overflooding of fish stocks in the market because of too much availability. So the market gets flooded, and therefore the costs then fall. And if fisher folks thought that they were going to get more benefits from a lot of fish, then they start seeing prices falling off, and they're not able to get as much as they wanted. Then the fish stocks begin to rot. It affects a lot of things in terms of their lives. The displacement as a result of the rising water levels, people now have to look for these high grounds. So the settlement patterns are also now impacted upon. And therefore, we cannot say that when it rains a lot, it's a blessing.
So where do you see us as a nation, Kenya? Where do you see us in the next 50 years if action is not taken?
Without proper climate action, we are going to have trouble because of our location, particularly for the coastal cities. We've seen those in the Rift Valley, those in the highlands, because the impact of climate change is now being manifested across the entire country. But of course, the prediction about the rise in temperatures and the loss in biodiversity and changes in productivity 50 years from now is a global problem. But at national level, Kenya is already putting in place lots of measures, including putting in place, not mitigation per se, but legislation for climate action to ensure that most of what is now being initiated is actually becoming what we call climate sensitive, or they are engaging in other things we call climate smart agriculture. Talk about buildings in most of the parts are now being considered or being thought through to take into account climatic conditions and resilience when they are designing these buildings, to ensure that Kenyans and the country and other parts of the world are actually prepared for what is coming.
So you said that there are legislation that are being made in order just to ensure that we don't have this severe impact of climate change. We've got this Paris or France treaty that the US withdrew from it. What do you know about it?
Now, the US withdrawal is a political decision, and I think it has a lot of impact in the sense that the developing countries depend on funding to implement some of those agreements in their, small nations. Now, when that budget is cut because as a result of the withdrawal of a major country like the US, then obviously it has a huge impact because it incapacitates the local, smaller countries' ability to try and invest in, climate mitigation action. Luckily, we believe that due to international pressure, US will get back to the table and try to put in place measures that can support, other international, players to ensure that countries such as Kenya and other countries in developing countries are able to effectively play their role. And this is quite significant because most of the climate change, or rather the factors that result in climate change, such as the emission of greenhouse gases, is actually a very prominent matter in the developed world, including US. And so if US withdraws from supporting countries such as Kenya that really are what you call the carbon sinks, then it becomes very difficult for us to continue providing those sinks if we can't engage in afforestation. We can't engage in, ensuring that our water sources are clear to continue absorbing much of that carbon. Engage in what we call carbon trading, for instance. We need a market where we get resources to ensure that communities are encouraged to continue leaving their spaces open to absorb much of the carbon. Deforestation is addressed. Now, all these require resources that a country like Kenya doesn't have. So we depend entirely on countries like the US and other developed countries to try and support such kind of action.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyumba. As we are winding up, what will you tell the young environmentalist who is listening to you so that we can have a safe environment?
Thank you very much, Justus. I think for the younger generation, I will tell you that go back and read the book, Our Common Future, because it talks about what we call sustainability. That is the fact that you are here today and you must think about your future to ensure that whatever you're using today is used in a manner that it leaves something for the future generation also to utilize. The future belongs to you, not to the older generation. So you must take action to safeguard your future. Otherwise, you'll have nothing to live on.
Thank you very much, the listener who is listening to this talk show. We are lucky to have you here at Vibe Zero Talk Show, and the listener have heard what you've said, the impact that we'll get if we don't take action. Thank you very much. I was your host, Justus Otieno at Vibe Zero Talk Show, and you can find Daktari at, maybe you can tell us where we can find him.
Yeah, well, I'm available at the University of Nairobi Institute for Climate Change and Adaptation. If you want to give me a call, I hope my phone number is safe, but you can call it anytime. It's a working phone number, 0720 114 221. Look for me on the website for Development Corridors Partnership. Just look for that on Google and you'll be able to find much of what I'm doing in terms of research that we can engage and see what can be done together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.